Well, good evening. A little odd for us to be here on a Monday again. I know I told you all I was going to take Mondays off, but we did have to reschedule last week based on thunderstorms and all kinds of things that were going on. The Masterson trial itself is on a long weekend. They had Friday and Monday off. So today we're going to refresh a little bit about Claire Headley's testimony from Wednesday and also talk about Jane Doe, too, who spent all day Thursday testifying, and her cross did actually start in the late afternoon. Um, Jane Doe, too, is an actress. We don't use the names, but she's well spoken. Uh, it's been reported that her testimony is a little hard to take when we're talking about it. It could get, it's emotional. Um, the retelling of her story actually puts a lot of the brutality and a lot of the focus on what happens to victims before and after. Jane Doe, too, unfortunately had experience with non-consensual assault with an ex, well, a recent ex of hers. Apparently, during testimony, she again recounted her tale of breaking up with her boyfriend, who is also a Scientologist. She was a Scientologist at the time, that he wasn't happy about it. She was sad that, they were breaking up, and she felt terrible that he was taking it so hard. They decided to go out together to like a gathering and a party. And when he said he wanted to talk to her, and they went off to the side at this place into a darkened stairwell, and he assaulted her against her will right there. She still was with him. She went home with him, trying to rationalize it. They said they were going to go to the chaplain of the Scientologist. They went there, and he said it's not assault. He said, just like they say, based on their teachings, that it wasn't. And so her first experience with this was that no, she don't believe it. Like, no, that doesn't sound right. Like, I know what it was. Like, I know. I said no. But again, they showed her all of the policies, all of the teachings, how to go through the ethics, the whole 9 yards. She went through with this ex, and he, of course, didn't have to. They had what they called counseling in regards to their breakup, and then that was the end of that. But sometime later, her roommate, that they were very, very good friends. Her roommate happened to be much closer to the Masterson group of social connection that was going on in Scientology through the Celebrity Center. Everyone in the ages, the younger ones, these 19 to 26, 27 year olds, hanging out after and all through the Celebrity Center. Masterson Circle, Luke Wilson being a big part of it, there all the time. Jane Doe too knew who Luke was, but she didn't know who Masterson was. And Ilaria decided to invite her to cheer her up to a party over there. And it wasn't really a party at his house. They went to a bar called the Well, and they were drinking. She was drinking water. It was her and her friend, her roommate, Luke Wilson, and Danny Masterson. And he was staring at her a lot. Her friend was like, "Oh, you've made such a great impression." Um, he asked for her number. She gave it. And the friend was like, when they got home, saying, "Oh my gosh, I've never seen him act like that with anyone else. I've never seen him be so, captivated by somebody. He's definitely going to call you." And he did. And here's where it starts to get, for me, rather uncomfortable. From from the beginning, Danny starts using command language with her. Now, there's this thing in Scientology where they teach you that the higher ups, they have a way of presenting commands to you that you all have to listen. There's a hierarchy. There is a way to talk. And there is when it occurs that way, they do it. Okay. And he immediately starts saying, not hi, I really like you, what else, you want to go on a date, whatever, what you might consider normal, flirting and dating and things like that. No. He says things like, and this is all right from her testimony, "You're gonna come over now. You're gonna you're gonna put on a bikini and you're gonna get into the jacuzzi." And she's like, "I don't really think I can come over right now." He goes, "No, you are coming over right now." He's being very forceful. He's using command language. He's going around. She's like, "Wow, is this his way of flirting?" Like, she's like going back and forth. But because of her Scientology training in her history before with being in a relationship with a Scientologist, she understands like kind of what this is. So she's like, "No, I don't want to go into the jacuzzi. I don't want to wear a bikini. But if you want to have a drink, I can have a drink. I'll come over. I'll have a glass of wine. We can talk." And they're going back and forth, text message wise, back and forth, but he's still being very demanding. Which at first, she's like, "Wow, that's like, where's that coming from? He's being like so demanding about this." But at the first, she just thought maybe that's just part of his character, something. She figures there's going to be more people there. It's going to be okay. She said that she went because he understood the parameters, that she wasn't going to go swimming. She wasn't going to go in a jacuzzi. She wasn't wearing a bathing suit, but she would come over so that they could talk and get to know each other a little bit. So she does go over there. And as has been in prior testimonies of Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 3, Danny Masterson offers her a drink. She has a drink of wine. She says within 20 minutes she starts to not be able to focus. She starts going in and out. She hears people talking to her, but she doesn't understand what they say. They start to like, okay, well, maybe get some air. They go in the back. It's by the pool. It's by the jacuzzi. He starts ordering her around again. He starts saying things like, "You're gonna take off all your clothes." And she's like, "No, I'm not." She's like getting silly, giggly, but like not understanding. And then all of a sudden she's like, "No, I'm not gonna do that." And then all of a sudden, like she doesn't have her clothes on. She doesn't remember if she did it or he did it because she's like going in and out and she doesn't really understand. And then there's water and she's saying no, and Danny's in there with her. And there's things going on against her will, but at the same time, she doesn't feel in control of herself. She feels giddy and silly and kind of out of herself, she says. She said some normal things like flirting and kissing were fine, but it was going a little bit farther. They got out of the pool, and the next, she goes to go to the bathroom. The next thing she remembers, she's in the bedroom. There's talking going on and things like that. She's going in and out of consciousness against her will. Well, she said things were happening in the shower that she understood and that she was saying no, but that things happened anyway. And that she started to feel like, oh gosh, not again. Like, how am I'm in this situation again. She kind of, from her belief before that it wasn't necessarily an assault like that, she basically was going along. And, to hear that in testimony in open court was not only traumatic for herself, which to her great credit, and to actually the prosecution was Arielle Ansel this time, was the female prosecutor, the DA, the assistant DA. And she was very good at drawing the story out, very slow, pace by pace, much slower than I'm telling you. It took much longer to get to this part of the story than I just did in like less than 15 minutes. But she, you could see she was emotional. All of the reporting says that she was taking her time. She asked for breaks and she was granted breaks by the judge. She was granted breaks. The prosecution was watching for her. She would request them herself if she felt she needed it, but she wanted to get all of the details out. Um, Jane Doe too has a lot of support witnesses. She's the one who has four support witnesses that are going to testify after her completing her testimony on Tuesday. She just started her cross examination by Philip Cohen at the end of Thursday afternoon. So she does need, they are going to bring her back to finish that and maybe a redirect. But then she will have four witnesses in support of her testimony. The actress Jordan Ladd, Her mother will be testifying, her friend Rachel will be testifying, and also Mariah O'Brien, all testifying to the facts of the things that happened here and what she reported to them, and incidences that went along with it in support. Um, you may, if you followed the first trial, the mistrial with me, you may recall that Jane Doe too, although said that she was flirting and kissing and doing heavy petting with Danny, that she literally told him repeatedly she did not want to have sex, not vaginal sex, not any kind of sex. Okay, but he ended up without her consent. She had vaginal sex. She says she passed out. She said during the vaginal sex, he then, this is this is the hard one, because he not only did he violate her that way, he literally flipped her over and took her from behind against her will, and after she had repeatedly told him no. And for her, this was absolutely just the worst part. She froze. She didn't know what to do. She said she was in pain. She said it was hurt, it was violent, it was brutal. He held her there. He entered her anally against her will. And for her, as a Scientologist, that's not something she would ever do. She had told him that she says she screamed at him, "No, I told you I won't do that." But he did it anyway, and he didn't care. And that, for me, shows the absolute disregard for what he was doing in regards, and actually leads credence to the other stories for me. Because for you to be in that kind of a headspace to do that to another person while they're telling you absolutely no and it's nothing that they want, the entitlement or where your head has to be in regards to how you feel about another person is just, it's something I can't fathom. um Reading that part of the testimony gets to be quite upsetting for myself. I'm sure many of you also will feel the same. But I always use the straight language, because if I'm going to say that it bothers me, you're going to know exactly why. And that's exactly why, you know. I- Anything without consent is bad enough. Okay, I get it. But uh for that kind of disregard and so violently like that was horrible. Absolutely horrible. This Jane Doe too, I have so much admiration for her to even be able to tell that story, to be able to come out and even talk about it like that. Um, from the place that she's coming from, where she's already blaming herself because she feels assault that happened to her before was something she misunderstood, or was not not the other person's fault. She's been told that this kind of assault doesn't exist in Scientology, that she's brought it to herself. There is something she may have done in Scientology. She then has to actually rectify this actual incident with something she may have done to somebody else of the same way. And that's why she has to go through it again. Um, Torturous. Can you imagine the mental gymnastics you have to go through to hear all that about something like this that has happened to you? Mm. She held her own on the stand. She needed breaks. But I can only try to put myself in her shoes, and I don't even know if I could do something like that. I consider myself a strong person, but the humility of the story, the actual, you can feel her embarrassment, her mortification. Like, she's mortified. She's like, she, she can't even understand why anything like this would happen. And then she's like, wow, like I wanted to get to know him. I was flirting with him. I was like doing this, I was doing that. And here she is, like during a violent attack, saying no, and yet still blaming herself at the same time. It's my heart. My heart breaks for her. And I'm sure the the actual details aren't so much as the evidence that's actually going to be coming forward, because her testimony is solid. She has lots of support. When she actually goes home, gets out of there, she calls her mother. She tells her mother about it. Mm. She talks about it, so she does get support. Um, she wants to report it, but she can't. Scientology doesn't allow her. She's already gone through the chaplain in Scientology with the first assault. And she doesn't understand how that's possibly going to work for her the second time around. And can you imagine? Can you imagine? Like, the only recourse that you have, and you know that it's not going to work. Now, this Jane Doe also admits to having an anxiety disorder. She doesn't really do well meeting lots of new people. She doesn't, she gets nervous. Her hands shake, her face shakes. Now, she's an actress and she's beautiful. And she's used to people like wanting to be around her, but she's quite the homebody and she's quite standoffish, based because of her anxiety. Um, she says that she was asked during her testimony if before she met Masterson if she had had a drink, and she said yes, she did have a shot of vodka and a glass of wine to calm her nerves because she was going to be meeting him, and he was kind of a big deal. Um, he was higher up than they are in Scientology, and it's part of the hierarchy that goes on. After all, he's from the Celebrity Center. He's a movie star. He's very well acclimated into Scientology. Like he said, he doesn't need ethics training, right? Because he doesn't need to go because he's doing okay according to Scientology. According to Scientology, he's just fine. And he's got quite the good standing. He's in good standing. And there's no need for him, you know? Yes, always. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Let me check the chat a little bit. We only have one day's testimony, so a lot of whatever questions you have about prior testimony will be perfectly fine today, because there's really not a lot of testimony. It's upsetting testimony, and we can't even get most of the cross in there. Hello, Tony. Let me just check the chat. Hey, Jean, it's nice to see you. I have said hi to Anna already, and always create full autistic shell. Mark Caesar. Oh, it's good to see you. Yeah. Tony, it's good to see you too. I'm just trying to go through and check. Hey, Mrs. Cassandra. How are you, boo? And Sean, very nice to see you too. Terrible subject. I agree. I totally agree. It is difficult for me to even talk about it straightforward in the language I like to use, because I find myself hesitating to try not to make the story too rough, to try to soften it. But how do you soften something like that? You know, how do you actually, you know, make that story sound any better? It's just horrible. You just can't. Mark Caesar says, I can't understand people that will violate others with no consent or consideration. Myself either, Mark. And I just, and the way that it was done, as if like it's bad enough he's already violating her vaginally and she's not really into it. And then to do that on top, I mean, all of it is bad. All of it is bad. But the brutality of the second part, it was really catches me. I'm not sure exactly what it has to do with it, but all of the Jane Does have said the same thing, that they would not do that. They have said they would not do that. It's against their beliefs. I'm not sure if it's a Scientology thing or just a common belief that they have. And we all have preferences and we all have choice. But they have all said absolutely they would not do that. It was the thing about Jane Doe 3 that actually upset her the most, is that he went ahead and did that without her while she was sleeping, which was probably a drugged sleep at this point because she didn't wake up, to the point that she was bleeding when she woke up. And actually, he laughed about it. And this is the thing that really disturbed her. Okay, they for Jane Doe too, she's clearly told him no, that was not something she would do. And Jane Doe 3 also. I get it always, like the level and amount of disrespect and violation is disturbing. Yes, and when all of the Jane Does tell their stories, they have some common elements: the entitlement, the demanding, the "you're going to do this" and "nope, that's just how it's going to be" attitude. They all were given drinks by him. He was in control the whole time. And every violation occurred when they were not in control of themselves. They were either to the point of a drugged feeling of like going in and out of what they would call consciousness or sleep. They all use interchangeably the words blacking out, unconscious, or sleeping, passing out. They weren't in control of their bodies. They're not completely aware of what's going on. It's rather disturbing, very disturbing. Crazy cat. Hey there, sir. No means no, period. What's wrong with these? I hear you. I hear you. Like no means no. I get it. And that's why I link the actual Fry's consent for educational purposes in all of these videos that Aunt Jer had kindly sent me the link. And I see you in the chat. It's lovely to see you there. Thank you. We link that now constantly. There are some sleep assault behavior studies that I have linked, and I'm also going to start linking the victim behaviors research that we've been coming up with, because a common thing here is the blame that they're all putting on themselves, and then to hear in cross-examination them to get double blamed back as if they asked for this is one of the most heartbreaking parts of this trial. Okay, assault is never something like I really want to cover just because it's assault. That's not why I even chose to even look into this one. It wasn't even the fact that it was a famous celebrity. I could care less who he is. It was all about consent and the way that we treat that in the legal system anymore. And it was also because many of the assaults were in like a unconscious or sleeping state with someone you were in a relationship with, which makes it very messy in the legal system because we haven't addressed that sufficiently enough to solid it up that no is no regardless. Okay. Prior acts or not, prior consent or not. You no is no. Well, you know, Judge Olmedo herself has done a very good job of actually telling the jury in the first trial exactly what non-consensual meant. And that meant the penetration for a sexual act against her will without consent. Without consent. Penetration without consent was the definition for her legally in that court. And that is for what the charge was. Now, the actual charges in the indictment are forcible or coerced sexual act against without consent. Forcible, like an assault, a sexual assault, forcible sexual assault by coercion or force. So he's either demanding, holding them down, whatever. It was against their will. And all three women are charged at the same time, which makes it up to 45 years, which is life that Danny Masterson can get if found guilty. Now, they did have to try it this way based on the loopholes that were used because of the length of time from the assault to the actual charges, which were 20 years plus in some cases. Okay, for Jane Doe 2, it's 2003. There were assaults in 2001 and 2004 with the other Jane Doe in 2002. These are old assaults. What we had, the organization of Scientology, the church of Scientology, to which all the parties were members at the time of the incidences that are being charged. And we had them in the way of actual regular reporting because they had to go through the church first. And when these women went to the church, they were told that that type of assault doesn't exist in Scientology. They don't use the R word. We're not allowed to say that word. We don't use it. We don't assign it. And we don't accuse higher members of us than us of any illegal crimes. Period. They were told that that doesn't exist. That's not what we do. You're going to have to figure out why this happened, why you feel the way you feel about it, why you're saying what you're saying. And they're pushing it all back on the women. And Jane Doe 3 herself went through all the ethics and all the check and all the training that they said that she needed in regards to this, what was happening in her relationship with Danny Masterson. And she begged Danny to go over there. She begged the people at Scientology to just have him come in. Like, he needs help. Like, I love him. I care for him. I want him to get better. This isn't right. But it didn't happen because he was in good standing. So you can't make him. And he said he's in good standing, so you won't. Now, Jane Doe, too, it's emotional and heart wrenching as this testimony was. She does admit to taking a drink. She admits to her anxiety disorder. She admits to being flattered at Danny's attention, but then still like trying to hold back on things she doesn't want to do. But he has a way of just doing it anyway, forcing her, and then he's done. And then she's like, okay, well, maybe just that then. And it's like this game of cat and mouse that you can see going on in the testimony when she's saying it. That based on how she's feeling after that drink, which she doesn't understand. She knows she had a drink before to settle down. She knows she had another glass of wine with Danny, but she really shouldn't be feeling like this. Like, she's had 2 glasses of wine before, and she never really got like this. Um Confusion was setting in. Uh, you you could you can tell by the ways that she's phrasing that although she actually knows kind of some of what's going on. There's big parts of it that are missing. She ends up in places and things are happening and she doesn't understand how it got there and what's going on. Um this makes it difficult. This makes it difficult for the prosecution a little bit because there's going to be some gaps that the defense attorney is going to like be going right at hard, and it was that way also in the investigation and everything. Well, she's very concise about the facts that she does know and that she does sure, and it's actually her willingness to admit how far her memories go and what she willingly did and what she didn't do, that for me, if I was hearing it firsthand on the jury. For me, that adds a bit of credibility. Because again, I'll say, who would want to go up there and tell these kind of things in an open court? Go through what these women are going through. Okay. It's not just this awful thing that happened to them, this completely degrading and demoralizing and just violating and violent thing that happened to them, that even though you're not to blame, you feel shame. And it's to go through that and the harassment by Scientology, Danny Master, everyone, to say that it didn't happen, that's not it, pile on, and then to be harassed because you go to the police and you want to report the crime and you want justice, and you're told, well, you don't get justice now. You're a suppressive person, now you're fair game, now you're against Scientology, so it doesn't matter what happened to you, you're the enemy. Not only did they lose their connections with Scientology, all of the friends and family, because yes, for a while they believed, but they built relationships with people that they can't have anything to do with anymore. And now they're harassed. We've heard testimony about emails being hacked, people's dogs being attacked, doorbells rung, people looking in windows, people being followed, work being called, pictures of backsides being sent to women and posted with their personal information saying they want a good time. Called them. Rude, insulting, horrible attacks, cyberbullying, all types of attacks, all being reported as coming under the guise of fair game with Scientology because now you're an enemy of Scientology. You speak out against Scientology. You're painting them in a bad light. So they're allowed to do whatever they want. There's no right and wrong under that policy. It's all do whatever you can to destroy their lives. Many people on YouTube, on every platform of social media, in the news, documentaries, podcasts, YouTube videos, channels that are dedicated to this, to talk about how they proceed against anyone they consider fair game. It's horrible. They all have very similar stories. They're relentless. They just keep coming. And the other day in testimony, when asked if the harassment was still going on and how it was, Jane Doe too said it's still happening and it's worse. It's happening right now. Jane Doe was intimidated by a Scientology lawyer during her testimony, looking at her and making faces. Remember in the first trial, when all of Masterson's side got up and stared at one of the witnesses, cold stared while everyone else sat down. They all stood to make sure that she saw, and they all looked her dead in the face. Intimidating. All of them at the same time. There's no doubt that they're being harassed. And now, in this trial, Judge Olmedo has widened the scope so that the harassment can come in based on the tactics of the defense, actually, which are going against that the women are all just bonding together to tear Danny down. And it's all for money. It's only for money. They made a civil suit outside of this trial only for the money. And when he started pressing on them about that, it opened up the door for them to say, no, our lawsuit is about harassment. And then the ability to talk about that harassment in this trial, because the harassment is also part of the reason why they did not actually get to file a complaint in a timely manner for the statute of limitation. Going to someone for help, telling people the horror of what you've been through, then treated this way, I get it. His family paid enough. I get it. Mm. I totally get that. Tony, I think what disturbs me the most is there is no rape in Scientology. If they have a blanket statement like that, then how many more violations and assaults have been covered up? Exactly, Tony. Exactly. How many? Because how many people have been made to feel this way? It's absolutely. Oh, hey, Farillian. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm glad to see you, though. If you're still listening, I'm glad that you're okay. I'm sorry work is really getting you, though. Well, perhaps you get a break later. Yeah. Well, it's Tuesday there. You only got a couple more days till the weekend. I know, Anna. This poor women, Scientology needs to be disbanded. There are countries working on that based on some of these things. But what we need is actually, see, the thing with Scientology, and especially a case like this, they're trying so hard to do whatever they can to discredit the women because a win here is a serious loss. Not only for Danny Masterson, of course, it's his life. 45 years is nothing to blink at. He should have to pay for his crime. Well, now, Scientology doesn't look at that way. They don't care if he did it or he didn't. They don't want him to pay for it because it'll mean they are also guilty. And the ball starts ticking. They have tried everything they can. They have a lot of lawyers. They put a lot of money behind it. They kill forests in paper constantly. When even in the beginning of this trial, the back and forth filings of over 1,000 thousands, okay, back and forth. Remember, they put in the ethics book to talk about how the women, they were trying to say it was a contract between a church member and a church of a church or organization, and the court had no way to force a violation of that. They can't do that. The women cannot talk about this. It's against the contract. They sign 1,000 lifetime year contract that, they can't speak anything about Scientology. But no, the court, they went through Supreme Court, through the state, and then up just to get everything. That's not it. It's not about the church here. This is about something that's illegal that was done to them, and they have every right to prosecute for it if there is a vehicle, to which the prosecutor in this case found one. That if the three of them, if he charged all three together, it shows a pattern, and he could actually get it in based on the things that happened before, extenuating circumstances, numerous hearings that Scientology tried to stop them time, every single time from this going forward, from Danny even being charged. Okay, he wasn't arrested till 2020. Reporting started in 2016. That's when the reporting started. And he didn't get arrested for 4 years. It kept getting kicked around, and trial after trial, hearing after hearing, not trials, but hearings after hearings after hearings, filings after filings after filings. My point being that they will tie you up in not Scientology to keep things from moving forward. A loss here is a really big thing for them. What I have to say, I am actually really hoping that something comes out of this where certain things change. Statute of limitation requirements get cleaned up to where extenuating circumstances like this, when explained and put forth in a proper legal briefing, can actually make a green light to prosecution for charging. Um, these women did what they could to work through the system that Scientology gave them to work through. And when that failed, then they went outside. And because they went outside of it, now they are attacked on a daily basis. And that's just wrong. That shouldn't be allowed regardless. Okay. If this did not involve the Church of Scientology and someone was going after the witnesses the way that this is going on, wouldn't we all be so upset with them? Wouldn't law enforcement do something? Wouldn't the judge be passing, out, stipulations and fines and everything else? You could file obstruction charges. Okay. Uh, the prosecution would have more leeway, but they're being strong armed a lot by Scientology and the weight of it. I mean, just in the first trial alone, every other day, every day, actually, not every other day, Philip Cohen was like, oh my gosh, you mentioned Scientology. That's so prejudicial. You can't do that. But he was the one coming in and talking about mayor's races and posts that he saw in Twitter and this and that. He was the one bringing it up over and over again, requesting a mistrial repeatedly. Thankfully, a lot of that wasn't in front of the jury, because when he complained about how many times Scientology was mentioned, I can assure you he's the one that brought it up more often than not. And he's complaining about now that there's so much Scientology in it, but he is the reason. He's the one who opened the door to the additional testimonies of the other Jane Does, to the actual testimony of Claire Headley, to speak about how Scientology represents these things, about fair game, about punishment, about being a suppressive person, how ethic reports are written, who has to fill out ethic reports and who doesn't, and what would happen if someone came to Scientology and said they wanted to report an assault. She was able to say exactly what all the procedures were. She couldn't in the first trial. But Philip Cohen's the one who opened that door by saying the women were just colluding together for money, that the only reason they are filing these charges is for money. They just thought of something from long ago, and now they're going to go for money, years later. They reported these assaults well before they filed that lawsuit. Well before they filed that lawsuit. Anyway, that civil lawsuit is for the harassment. And when Cedric, Jane Doe 3's husband, testified, he specifically said, we've had expenses, we've had to move, we've lost jobs. We have to pay for therapy for our children because people peek in our windows and harass us. That statement alone really kind of wiped me out, you know. Yeah. So they all got together. They're going to sue them. They're suing Scientology. They're suing Danny Masterson and David Miscavige for running Scientology. Those are the three named. And it's the three Jane Does and husbands. So back to Jane Doe too. She's going to have a pretty tough cross. She's being very honest about the drinking and things like that. And you know how Philip Cohen went for Jane Doe 1 about the drinking, remember? And Judge Olmedo was quite stern with him in regards to bringing up past testimony, bringing up prior acts, or the behavior of the Jane Does as accusatory as to what happened to them. She's not having that. And in California, there are laws to protect that. You can't talk about how they were dressed or why were they there, things like that. Okay. But they are saying certain things, as we reported and talked about last week. They are saying things like, "Were your legs open? Did you yell? Did you yell loud? How loud? Did you fight back? What did you say?" Forgetting the fact that they're altered, forgetting the fact that a lot of this happened when they were in a sleep state, so to speak, not actually conscious. The nerve, the absolute nerve. Makes me sad in regards. Yes, Aunt Sure, he laughed at her when he found out she was bleeding. Yes, the next day. He laughed and said, "Yeah, we had a good time. That's what we did." Uh-huh. It's not hard to respect their wishes. I get it, Mark. I do. And thank you for asking and accepting a no. I mean, I would more people should actually. I hope to hear less of these kind of trials, okay? But yeah. Exactly, Mark. Why not get a doll? If you're going to have to do something with someone unconscious like that, just get a doll or whatever, but I do know it's a fetish for some people, but even fetishes need to be with willing people. I mean, listen, here's the thing. I'm not going to kink shame anybody. Do what makes you happy, but do it with consent with somebody else. The fact that consent doesn't exist makes it wrong, no matter what it is. And that ain't kink shaming. It just makes it wrong, totally wrong and illegal, period. Okay. So that's not kink shaming. I don't care what he did. He did it all without permission. And that's a problem. And it should be a problem. It should be more prosecutable. It should be easier to actually I don't want to say easier because there are percentages of women who do falsely accuse. However, the ones that actually falsely accuse to where an actual charge of assault happens is very, very small. However, we have seen in the middle of other types of law cases, like divorce cases and in defamation cases, where these words are thrown around and used to the woman's advantage to discredit the man. But he's not been charged with any assault or anything. But to discredit him, they'll tell these stories. That's wrong. Okay, so I don't want to make it easier for that kind of stuff to happen. Absolutely not. But I do want to make it easier to testify. I want the securities. I want harassment in general of the victims to stop. But how do we do it? As a society as a whole, we think things like, why were you there? Why did you go back? Why did you do this? Not being able to put ourselves in their position. Because face it, it's such a horrible situation. How can we even imagine what it would be like? But a lot of women stay. And we heard those percentages when Barbara Ziv testified last week. 80, 85% of assaults go unreported. Only 15% of women fight back. And that's usually if it's someone they don't know. They almost, they hardly ever fight back when it's someone they know, based on the shock and the not sure what's going on, like with like the position that they're in with someone they are already known to and intimate with, that they care about, that they think cares about them. There's a level of trust that comes with intimacy that also makes us extremely vulnerable. And it gets to be twisted easily by a malevolent person who does not care about anyone but himself. I'm sure you all could see that. And you can see how, in that position, someone may not be able to fight back. It might be over with before you even think about reacting. I've spent the last couple of days thinking about this and how to probably put into words the best way I think that the system could change, but I have no answer. After days and days of thinking about it, except for to firm up the laws on consent and when no means no, and our legal definition in the actual courts, maybe expand some of the charges that can be put against somebody, but definitely to work on the statute of limitations and the different scenarios that happen. Okay. But also, just as a society, as all of us, as a whole, just actually to give more support to anyone who says something like this has happened. Because it happens so much more than we know about. I can assure you, all of us know someone it's happened to. And it may have been in an intimate relationship that they had. Because the numbers of those assaulted by people they know is quite high. The number of sleep assault is quite high. Um, it gets kind of messy. The lines get a little bit blurry on what may have happened before and what can happen after. I can only say that for me, in regards to prevention and comfort for myself, my partners, and everyone around me, it's the conversations. It's actually taking the bulls by the horn and talking about these things. Would you be upset if I woke you up for sex? Would you be this, that, the other? There's nothing wrong with these conversations between two consenting adults. And they sure could keep people out of court or keep people's feelings from being hurt or from feeling violated or anything done against their will. And I don't understand why partners don't do it more often, just for their own security, for what is going to be okay. You know, not the most romantic thing in the world, I get it. But neither is the other side of it. And nothing romantic about that. Nothing romantic about regret. It's better to be sure than to be told later it's something somebody didn't want. It's better to be sure, don't you agree? Than to end up in the situation where, oh my gosh, it's not something they wanted. Hmm. Hmm. Hey, grumpy old dude. How nice to see you. Hmm. Very weird subject to come in on, huh? Thank you for the thumbs up, Grumpy. I hope you have a good day at work. Mark asks, what's the ruling on if you don't hear the woman say no? I'm trying to construct a fingers in ears, na defense. No, there's no if you don't hear it. If she says she said it, she said it. And you need to be aware because it's not going to protect you to say you didn't hear it. Because, it's kind of like that thing. It reminds me of the saying, ignorance of the law is no excuse. Okay. Like putting your finger in your ear so you can't hear her say no is not going to save your ass if she says she said no. It's going to be a he said, she said, unfortunately, in our court system, the way it is here. Well, depending on the scenario, you could greatly lose. Yeah, it could go either way. Hey, NA. Mark, thank you for becoming a member. Welcome aboard. If you have a Discord, do you mind hitting me up either on Twitter or mm, Instagram, or even on the back of the comment here, a way to get a hold of you to exchange Discord IDs? If you'd like to join the Discord, it is a perk of membership, and we'd be glad to have you in there. It's a bit of fun. Lots of conversation goes on in there. Sean Coffey says, just with that statement, the church broke U.S. laws and should be prosecuted for it. Yes, in regards to not being able to report others for crimes, this is true. Because what they're saying is those crimes like don't exist. Like they're just mistaken. You know, this is the problem, is that they have their own set of rules, and their rules are what everyone has to take care of first. And it doesn't matter if it's illegal out here, but they'll tell you, oh, that's wrong. You can't say that about Scientology. We're not asking them to violate law anywhere. They don't want you to hear that. But when you tell people they can't report a crime that was done against them, not only is that a civil liberties crime against the person themselves for holding them back for something that happened to them. It's oppression, definitely. But actually, to say that like Danny couldn't have committed this crime because it doesn't exist, it's just different. He used that knowledge of his standing within not only Scientology, but also in the acting realm to exert the coercive control. It was a I can make you or break you. I get it. And his coercive control skills are quite good, actually. Jane Doe 3 testified to it in the whole time of their relationship. When Danny told you something was going to be, that's it. There was a way and a command and a voice that he was trained to use that he was like. And this is the thing that the Nixium cult, okay? Keith Raniere found this fascinating by Scientology. They studied this aspect of it and they used these, okay? The coercive control voice and the way of speaking and making things known. Um, they're undeniable. You will absolutely do whatever I say. That's another cult that just the actual existence of that and how they picked and chose all from Scientology and all these other cults to actually manipulate everyone involved just to do exactly what they wanted. It's horrible. Hey, Ox. Do you feel oh, thank you, Ox. I've been clarinated. I feel so much better. Thank you. I feel like what? Like I'm like a new drug. Okay. Just be careful, small doses. Anyway, thank you. That made me smile. But it's always nice that you say you're so friendly with everybody in the chat. Thank you so much. Hey T King, how are you doing? Good to see you here too. True. The level of intimidation and harassment with Scientology has no end. Yes, and there's no end to the people talking about it either. If you want more information on that, you do not have to go far at all. You will definitely find someone to. I mean, some of my favorite, Chris Shelton and Tony Ortega, like shout out again, like every stream. Tony Ortega for doing the report. He's got a nice long weekend ahead of him. He had Friday, Saturday, Sunday. He's got today off. Tomorrow, we will start testimony again in California, Los Angeles, in the court with Jane Doe 2, and it'll be on cross examination. Philip Cohen continuing his cross examination of Jane Doe 2, and then we're going to go on to her 4 support witnesses. We then have Kathleen Jenkins, which is the 5th victim to actually testify. Remember, we had Miss Vesey in the mistrial. She came forward as the 4th Jane Doe and gave her testimony, but she wasn't available for this one. They're using Kathleen Jenkins, who also had a similar experience. Her husband's going to testify. Then we will probably hear from the legal side of it for all the reporting, because remember, Philip Cohen likes to take all of the reports and say, well, you said this word here and you said that word over there, and you didn't mention it in this report, but you mentioned it in that report. going through everything. So we are definitely going to hear from Officer Schlegel, Detective Mayers. We're going to hear from Reyes. We're going to hear from Detective Vargas, who took over for the LAPD. We're going to hear from everybody in regards to the documentation of the complaints in within the legal system. Then we still have on the prosecution side, we still have the toxicology expert from the police department who deals with drugged and date rape victims and of this nature, only not to testify whether they were or not, but just to testify what the common symptoms are in scenarios and how it affects memory and things like that. We've as we have heard from Mindy Mechanic and from Barbara Ziv for this. Okay. We're also then going to have the defense does have Bree Schaefer on the list again. We don't know if she's going to come forward. We also have Claire Headley's stepfather, who will be testifying against what Claire Headley said as far as Scientology practices. And they also have toxicology and memory experts, psychologists on the list. But they had a pretty good list. They had 3 or 4 people listed last time with the mistrial, and they called no one. At this time, we don't know if Danny is going to testify in his defense. He could, but he doesn't have to say until the end. He did not in the mistrial. Uh, so we're gonna have to see. We're gonna have to see if they're confident where they are, whether they'll be calling contestant calling these witnesses up for testimony. They didn't last time. I guess it'll be where they feel it is at the end. But uh, as far as where Jane Doe left her, actually, Jane Doe actually was asked by prosecution, like, who she told about the event, and she reported that she had told Jordan Ladd. Um, it was either Jordan Ladd or her mother that she said first. Um, she hesitated to tell anyone, and this part really got to me. And it's because of the event before, because she's been through this and she's gone through Scientology, and so she kind of hesitated. She said, because she had been shown what happens if you go to law enforcement and also what happens in the church, you'll be punished. You can't come against a person in good standing. So this is really hesitated her. She had more experience than the other two in regards to reporting on this, and she really hesitated. Okay. Um, she says that she actually told her mom well within the first time that she actually was so mad at Danny that they actually had a conversation. She actually called him afterwards, but it was around that time. She was dealing with a lot of anger. It wasn't like immediately, okay? Um, she did not use the word they do not allow in Scientology. She said, that things weren't going good and that something had happened with Danny and that it was violent and it was against her will. She did say that. Um, she said that it was so violent what happened to her that she literally vomited in her mouth while it was happening. That really got to me. That she was so ill. She was so upset by it. She was so. And then she was concerned. She was concerned. She don't want to upset her mother too much, but she needs to tell her, you know. Um, Her mother is not a member of Scientology anymore. She did kind of get Jane Doe 2 into it. She had a light belief on it, but she wasn't really active in it anymore, and she was kind of backing away at the time. Um, so during her testimony, there was a little bit of an altercation. They needed to have a sidebar. There was several people in the second row, two two women who were making Jane Doe 2 uncomfortable, according to prosecution. Uh, during right before they start talking about it, uh, the defense attorney Holly asked the women in the third row to go out and talk to the defense team. Then Cohen came back in and said he was ready to put it on the record. So the judge asked Miss Anson, the prosecution, you said there were two women making Jane Doe 2 uncomfortable, and Cohen said that Jane Doe 2 thought they were from the Sea Org. Um, and that the judge said, well, that's because she thought because of their dress and hairstyle. And Cohen reports that he spoke to both the women. They're public defenders with the Los Angeles Public Defender's ID office, and they actually had ID for that. The judge said, okay, that's on the record. That doesn't necessarily mean they may not be affiliated with Scientology. So the judge asked both if they are, right to them, and they both said that they were not. She asked Jane Doe too if she feels better about it, and that's it. They bring the jury back in. Um, but you see, they tried to make her comfortable. You could see how upsetting it is. Jane Doe 1's been intimidated by people in there. Jane Doe 3's been intimidated repeatedly. Her family has been harassed beyond. Her children are upset all the time. She gets calls, she gets emails, she gets harassed. To this day, to the minute that she testified. Okay. Oh, Jane Doe 1 saying the same thing. Okay. Now Jane Doe 2, oh, they've got people staring at them. They feel after having all this type of harassment and the church down on them like this for so long, just someone who looks like someone who may be part of the organization terrifies them. Jane Doe 2 has an anxiety disorder. This isn't helping it at all. The pressure that she's under to testify, it's just, I just feel, um, I can understand why, and I admire the prosecution and the defense are doing what they can not to have anybody harassed actually in the classroom, in the courtroom anymore, because the defense doesn't want it to appear that Scientology is doing that, even though they've been called out twice. There's been several incidences in regards to Scientology already. There was the elevator incident, and an ex-Scientologist harassing the priest there who wasn't part of Scientology but said he was there to protect the liberties, the religious liberties of Scientology, make sure they weren't being violated here in the court. But admitted to having no affiliation, however, was attacked in front of the jury. Admonitions happened from the judge. Everybody's getting called out. Wasn't pretty. But all of this does is just disrupt the testimony. They did get Jane Doe to calm down. She was feeling better. And then she started talking about how she started telling people about what happened to her. And she told her friend Jordan Ladd within like 2 weeks of the incidents. And she didn't have an actual she admits to not having a perfectly clear memory of the whole thing, that she could only tell her things in bits and pieces, and she did do it in person. It wasn't on a phone. She also had told her friend Rachel. She had told her mom. um her friend Rachel is a Scientologist. um when she speaks about Rachel, she says she doesn't feel fringe with Rachel like she does a lot of the Scientologists. She actually feels closer. There's more of a connection. They are friends. They seem to understand each other better. Um, she actually felt that Rachel was the only one who was a Scientologist that she could actually tell about this thing that happened with her and Danny Masterson, this awful event, this incident against her will. Violent incident against her will. Um, and she said that Rachel kind of listened to her, and she knew that she really felt that she wasn't going to put her in danger. Um, she told her the same thing that she had told her friend Jordan Ladd about being jackhammered from the back so violently that she threw up in her mouth. That's how she explains it. Forceful, jarring, painful, all of that. She tells it graphic. She also told Mariah O'Brien, um, uh, in 2014, quite a few years later. They were friends. Um, she she was very fringe. She's not sure she was a Scientologist at any time. And she's asked to clarify what she means by fringe. Um, Meaning, she may have been married to a famous Scientologist and had an extended family through marriage and still does, but she wasn't really active. At the time, she was a Buddhist and she didn't seem to have committed to Scientology in any way. Like she wasn't doing the ethics and all of that. She wasn't doing the programs. Okay. She was married into it because, her spouse was a Scientologist and she had family that was. They talk about whether she is like still friends with the people that will be testifying. Yes, for Jordan Ladd, absolutely. Her mother, of course, is still alive and they're very close. Okay. And Mariah O'Brien, she had told her about what happened to her with Danny. Well, she admits that they're no longer friends. And when asked why, she said, "We became not friends the day I told her that Danny Masterson raped me." And that was in 2014 at her home at a dinner with Binky, who is a mutual friend of them. Um, and that she had disclosed at the table that that had happened, and that was the end of the relationship there. Well, that is also where other people had heard it, and how the other Jane Does found out about it was this vocalization by Jane Doe 2 at this dinner party when asked, and that is how Jane Doe 3 had heard about it. Um, Someone at that dinner party had told her. She said that she had met Jane Doe 3 back in the church when she had been dating Danny Masterson for a long time, and she would see her at parties back in the early 2000s. Um, she had a peripheral casual relationship and barely knew her until they discovered they had this in common. And again, she reported that they do not talk about the details of what was done to them. They only talk about an incident that happened because they don't need to say what happened because they seem to understand. Mm. They are talking before the end of day session after lunch. Um Tony Ortega had reported that there were assistants to Viggy Podboreski in the audience. She wasn't there herself, but there were quite a few people there still from her office, staring at the witnesses and not acting out or doing anything, but their presence making others uncomfortable. We talked about the meeting of Jane Doe 3 and Jane Doe 2, that they talked first over text, and then agreed to continue a conversation by phone. Um, they spoke about having the assault, but never in great detail. Um, they did talk about who did it. They just talked bullet points. They never actually spoke about the actual incidences, just the things that they had in common and about reporting it in Scientology. They talked mostly about their interactions with trying to report it and Detective Reyes. Detective Reyes and her partner were the first ones to interview Jane Doe 2 at her own apartment they went to. It was like 2.5 hours long. Um, she answered all the questions that she could, gave the information she could, but again, reports that she just answered questions that were asked of her. It wasn't freestyle reporting of any type. It was just, asking them. They were very nervous. She'd never really done this before. She had a terrible, well, she did because she went to Scientology with the first time it happened with her ex and all had a very not pleasant outcome. with the whole thing, totally feeling responsible and full of blame. And so now she's in this process illegally trying to talk to detectives and all, and she's very nervous. She's uncomfortable. She doesn't know what to expect. She doesn't know the people that she's telling this very intimate, graphic, painful, horrible story to. She's trying to recall details and answer their questions. But it was she didn't want to go through every tiny detail with a fine-tooth comb. So again, she says that she is just actually answering questions, which is the same thing that Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 3 have said. Those first reports are all them just answering the questions after they made the statement. Um, Jane Doe too reported that she never felt comfortable speaking to the police because in Scientology, she had already read the policy that's called safe pointing with different law enforcement agencies, even government higher ups and IRS. Your organizations are instructed to do safe pointing. That means that in order to protect the church, you become friendly with them or you pay them to protect the church from any trouble. And she thought that Scientology had this long, well documented history of being close friends with the LAPD, so she did not feel like they were an advocate for her. She was looking at them as if they represented the church at the time. She knew it was a well known thing. It was talked about all the time in Scientology about this closeness with the LAPD, that nothing would happen that they didn't know about. And so she knew that they were going to know everything. And so it just made her more nervous and more uh, the feeling of unsafe. She's going to answer their questions because she knows she needs the report on file, but she didn't feel very comfortable about it. Um, uh, she's asked if Reyes and Vegas is the name of the partner for Esther Reyes, Detective Esther Reyes, who was point at the time for the LAPD for this Masterson assault investigation of more than one person. Um, he was asked, did they ask you about people you told closer in time, and did they ask for names? And she says she thinks so, and she said she would have said Jordan and Rachel Smith right away. She's not sure if she told them about Mariah, but she thinks she did. Because that incident was fresh on her mind, because now she's reporting, and Jane Doe 3 also knows about it. Um, She was asked if she was ever admonished by Detective Reyes for speaking with other victims or witnesses, and she said yes. And she said she didn't want her to speak to any other of the victims. Her manner of doing that was odd, and there were things going on that were really odd that stood out to her as suspicious or bizarre. Things related to like not getting calls back, not following up with the people that she told her knew about it. Just some unprofessionalism that kind of really was starting to make her think that they weren't in the best hands here, that they were going to have to protect themselves. Now, Jane Doe 3 also talks about these kind of feelings, and Jane Doe 1 too. The way they were treated, the way things weren't being followed up, prosecutions not happening because of vacations and schedules not being met. This shouldn't happen to a victim, someone who is actually trying to get justice for a crime done against them. The red tape and the shenanigans that were going on is quite apparent here. Now, we're not going to slam on the organization. I mean, it may have its problems. What I mean by all of that is not so much that they did this all intentional or all, on purpose. That's a whole nother thing. I'm just saying about how it made all of them feel, how they felt like they had to come forward and do things themselves with these suit, why the civil lawsuit may have come forward, why they started actually pressing harder together with the district attorney to get things done. Um, we're talking about they all know each other, but all of them are suffering from lack of sleep, harassment, anxiety. Everyone on that witness stand has been, every Jane Doe on that witness stand has had trouble with anxiety, um, based on the harassment and everything else that they've been receiving. Um, she said that she spoke mostly with Jane Doe 3, not so much with Jane Doe 1. Um, and she was asked point blank if they ever shared facts of the incidents and events with each other, like the details, like how things were done, what we are actually accusing Danny Masterson of. And she said very minimally, no details, not like that, nothing like that. They talked about how they felt about the stuff, how they felt about what was going on with the police a lot, all of that. But they didn't go into details of each other's event. It wasn't necessary. It was just enough to that they were talking about the same thing. So she had like 3 or 4 conversations with her before the actual filing for prosecution interviews for deposition. That doesn't sound like coercion to me, but the defense is making a big deal about it. So they're going to be going, I believe, tomorrow. You're going to hear that they went a little bit hard on her in regards to speaking with the other Jane Does about what had happened. But like Jane Doe 3 and Jane Doe 2 had answered, the details were never given. It's going to be hard to match up these things that had in common if we never talked about it. They had plenty of other things to talk about in regards to the case. It's in regards to how they were treated by law enforcement, about Scientology. A lot of it was all in the process of what happened when Scientology found out, when they went to Scientology, what they had to go through, how they feel about it. Believe me, it's I can see how they actually got here. She went on to report about the harassment that she's been receiving. She says she receives it to this very day, that it is at the hands of Scientology 100%. She said she was asked why, based on these allegations of harassment, did you file a lawsuit against the Church of Scientology, David Miscavige and Danny Masterson? And she said, yes. She said, are you asking for damages? Yes. Monetary damages? No. What is the main reason? To get the harassment to stop, to get the stalking to stop, she said. And now, 6 years later, to have some of the damages compensated that have accumulated for 6 years. And on that, they ended the direct questioning. And for cross examination, Philip Cohen then started. He starts writing on the civil lawsuit. He wants to know, do you think the lawsuit has impacted your truthfulness today? She says no. Has it impacted how you present yourself to the jury? She says no. He said, we took a break because you indicated there were 2 people who walked in during your testimony and were concerning to you. She said, yes, I wasn't sure. We took a break because of your uncertainty. And he said, yes. She said, yes. They made you nervous. They they made me uncomfortable, she said. He said, you thought they were Scientologists? She says, yes, I thought they were Sea Org, which is different. Do you believe that Detective Reyes is Scientology? He asked. And she said, no. And he said, how about Detective Vegas? And she says, no. Do you feel they are being paid or influenced by Scientology? And she says, I have no idea. Do you believe that Reyes is crooked in some way? I have no idea. It sounds like it impacted how you interacted with her. No. When you spoke with her, were you truthful? Yes. You answered to the best of your ability? That's fair. Yes, I did. So then wants to go into all of the different, he puts up a list of interviews and dates, um, saying this just lays out the interviews that you were given, the major ones. And she says, okay. He says the allegations stems from the late 2003s, and she says correctly. He says, and the first time you ever gave an interview was in January 27th of 2017, and she confirms it. He says, was that the first interview to anybody? And she says, I believe so, yes. And it's when you gave the statement, the events that had happened in late 2003 were certainly fresher than they are today. She said, I do not know that to be true because when an event is very singular, first of all, in different proceedings, I had to keep remembering. Some of it comes back to me. And also, when something is really singular, whether it's getting married or breakup or a rape, those have pieces that don't leave you. He says, I understand pieces may not leave you. So things that happened in 2003 may never leave you. She says, yes. He says, with respect to certain facts, your memory has gotten better and it's objected and sustained. Is it your testimony that from January 2017, he asked, your memory has actually gotten better in some instances? And she truthfully answers yes. Okay, when you are interviewed by Reyes in 2017, did she ask you at any point if Danny hurt you? She did. What did you tell her? I said no, because it was the first time I was trying to remember. He presses on her if she's telling the truth, and she says yes. Did you also ask if he was going to hit you? And yes, I said that no, he wasn't going to hit me. And he said, well, is that the truth? And she said, yeah, because at the moment, I don't know if I entirely knew what she meant. And like I said earlier, she talks about not having coherent thoughts during the assault. And she speaks sounding like a robot to give the impression that the thoughts weren't that coherent. And she's trying to explain to him that it's you're asking me if I was truthful, and I'm telling you, as I remember everything, what I said at the time was the absolute truth. Did it change later? Yes, it did, because she remembered more or something became more clear. Um, Not that unusual from what we're seeing in the testimony from Barbara Ziv and from the prior testimony of Mindy Mechanic in the mistrial, which we cannot actually, the jury will not be able to take any of that into consideration. They can only go by the testimony in this trial. But it's not that unusual to actually have clearer thoughts at a later time, into then in have the story get changed somewhat. Not totally different, but just enhanced with greater detail. Okay. When he then asked, "Did Reyes and Villegas take steps to make you comfortable?" And she said yes, that they came to her house. And he said, "Were they there? They were there for 2.5 hours." She said, "Yes, they could have been there 10 hours, and I'm going to remember what I remember in the moment." And then Judge Olmedo intervenes, and she says that they're going to be done for the day, and she does ask everybody to step out, but she has an admonition for the jury after the witness has left the room. It's a stipulation actually from the attorneys and from Cohen actually, and to tell the jury directly that the two women who were seated in the third row that Jane Doe 2 had referred to, neither of them were associated with Scientology or Masterson in any way. And the DA agrees. And that was the end of the day. And Jane Doe 2's cross examination is going to resume tomorrow morning, May 9th. Um, Now, Judge Almeida has been starting court a little late on certain days because as she's got this big murder gang trial going on, and that has been delaying some things that are going on. Let's see. And Scientology will be liable for a lot with the guilty verdict. I agree. And the church won't get any of the money Danny Masterson has to pay. This is true. But the okay, you know what, Anna, you're right. There's been terrible atrocities by the Catholic Church, and some of the laws in New York actually for statute of limitations have changed because of that, so that adult survivors can actually file. There's a year window that started at late November of 2022 for anyone, an adult survivor of any type of sexual assault mm, violation against their will, may actually seek legal ramification at this time, due process. Yep. It's not just the Catholic Church. I agree. It is like many organizations. The sad thing with their contracts is that even when a person is named as a suppressive, they are still bound by that contract according to Scientology. Exact. That's it. It's like never ending, and they just continue to be harassed because of it. Mm. Yep. Yes, most likely. But when you have churches that refuse to do anything about it and instead throw money and power to keep things hushed, hypocrisy needs exposed, not hidden. Exactly, because what stays in the dark, exactly, can fester, and it needs to be purified with light. Absolutely. Bring it out into the light because that's the only way to get it handled. If for any reason a church or any organization tells you to lie, run. And I agree, Sean. Any organization, any group of friends, any like employer, any like contract that actually wants you to lie about something, run. Like just run. Um, it's not going to be good either way. Okay, that's a good question, Ox. Because of the length of time, and the fact that the women were not free to actually go to the police department to have a rape kit done at the time of all of this, they were in personal relationships with him and they went through the vehicles that they had. They were told, no, it didn't occur. Okay. And, but hear what I say. Do you really think they would actually come out with these horrific stories like this if something didn't happen against their will? I understand people thinking that you actually have to have physical evidence of this for Danny to be guilty. That's not true. Here, they need to think the jury needs to decide whether proponent of the testimony from all of them, not only the victims, but they also the experts who say the likelihood of whether they would be fabricated, the likelihood of whether they were drugged or not, just in the similarity of behaviors that go, on whether they're telling the truth. Because it is only the women's statements and the statements they made to others at the time. Now, I say that because that's very important here. Because if it was just the women coming forward with no collaborating witnesses at all, this would be a very different trial. But we have collaborating witnesses. We do for all of them. People witnessed certain things, people were told things right away. We have people who saw bruises. We have people who saw people acting drunk, overly drunk in situations where they normally wouldn't be. Okay. We had a public altercation outside of a restaurant with other people that Danny Masterson was involved with Jane Doe 3. Um, a lot of people witnessed that. It was all over every paper. Um, I understand you don't want to actually say somebody did something like that without an actual some type of physical evidence or something presented that way. But the evidence in this case is all the testimony of the Jane Does, the collaborating witnesses that they told people that were around at the time, the practices of Scientology itself, okay, the actual reporting and everything that was done uh, in in Los Angeles and in San Pedro before, um, the investigation that was done then. Mm. But even then, that was already many years after the fact. So I agree. It's quite unusual. And you don't want to actually you don't want to actually believe something like that would happen. But the what is actually becoming more and more apparent from pattern and from testimony is that they possibly were drugged. And Danny is the one who handed them every drink. And that every woman reports being in no control of her body. So I don't think you need evidence of anything after that if an act occurred. Because a person that would actually go for someone like that when they are completely altered is not one looking for consent anyway. It's not like he asked. It's more like he assumed. So, yeah. And for thank you for those who are adding additional information for Ox in there. It's not that they can't prove it because no toxicology was done at the time, Ox. If they were allowed to, if they actually could have gotten out of there and reported it that day, then you would have toxicology reports and everything that you would think you would see in a regular trial. But this is an extraordinary one, which is why I'm covering it. It is 20 years after the fact in some cases, and it is based on the testimony of the women and those supporting them at the time. And there's not going to be a toxicology report. There is going to be a toxicologist from the police department who reports how these things happen and what the symptoms of a person under that influence would be, how easy it is to hide in a drink, how fast it acts, what it does, um, common things. Hmm. Uh, hmm. There are no toxicology reports, Andrew, because they didn't report it at the time. It took a few years through Scientology before they did. In I will say yes, Sean. In many in several states, we do have now that partner inebriation and lack of consent in unconscious laws. However, in some states, they still say it doesn't exist between married couples. So it becomes a little convoluted in some of the states. Okay. The Sexual Assault Foundation has tried for years to change the definition of no means no on various situations. The courts are slow to recognize them. The legal system is slower. I agree, Anna. We do have like the fries example, and we do have lots of education out there. And I would say that the conversation has expanded, and in general, men and women are having the conversation more often, and I, at least the gentlemen that I speak with, actually understand the concept, and the women do too, as into regards to their responsibility for voicing boundaries and things ahead of time if necessary, especially if there is like any confusion or or any doubt of in any way. um let's just say we're trying to put a knife in assumptions here. No one's allowed to just second guess anybody anymore, and that's unfortunate. It kind of takes the romance out of it when there's not spontaneity. But a conversation prior, not even while, I'm not talking about right then and there. How about way prior, like way prior to even doing anything? Um, I know that sounds kind of like bold. And I'm not a very forward person when it comes to intimacy that way. I am very forward in speaking about it in terms of accepting and that it's natural and like everybody just do what makes you happy, please yourself, please others, all of that. When it comes to the actual intimate connection with all, I'm not an actual um aggressive person in any way that way, but I do believe in having the conversations well before. I don't want any confusion. I want my partner to be as comfortable as I am. I want him to be reassured as to the boundaries and the goals and where he can go without even a second thought. And I think that that adds a sense of freedom to the whole thing. Um, it can be uncomfortable and embarrassing. I get that. And you would think in this day and age we wouldn't have to do it. But apparently we do. And it's for both of us. It's to protect both of us. It's a matter of respect and consideration. Um, but I do understand that for a lot of people it's uncomfortable. And it's not something you want to think about all the time. But it is a sure way to make sure you're on the same page. Conversation is always going to do that. Communicating with each other is always going to guarantee that you're on the same page. Hmm. No problem, Mark. I understand some people don't like Discord. That's just fine. It's just a benefit that I just wanted to make you aware of. Your choice. Okay. Harold says, imagine being so out of touch with someone you're being intimate and claiming you didn't hear no, as if there would be no signs of no in body language alone. They know, they just don't care. And I totally agree with that statement, Harold. There's no way you don't know when someone's not into it, unless you're routinely having intercourse with dead fish. What can I say? Hmm? Come on. Let's That's a real conversation to have. Harold has just nailed it to reality. Whether she said no or not, when there was pillows being put on people's faces, when you have to forcibly hold somebody there that's trying to scramble across a bed and get away, and you actually have to forcibly put your hands on their hips and drag them back across that bed to you, how do you think that that is not a no? When they are actually vomiting, how is that not a no? Crying, how is that not a no? But I can assure you tomorrow we're going to be asked. Jane Doe too will be asked, did you say no? Did you scream it? How did you say it? How often did you? Because that's what they did to the other two Jane Does. So I'm expecting it. I know I'll be upset by it, but it just shows me they don't have anything else. I know, Mark. I'm not in Scientology. I can use the word. I've been saying it so much, it kind of sticks in my throat. Hey, Rabbits, thank you for stopping by. It's always good to see you. I know, Rabbits. I want to talk to Harold so much about Scientology. Would you please encourage him that it only takes a mic and a little circle with a picture, and we could just sit, we could actually have some good conversations about Scientology? It would be great. And if you want to practice, Harold, let's hit the Discord sometime in a voice chat. Because I really want to hear what you have to say about Scientology. I've been looking into it for quite some time. Not only with these legal cases, but just as a cult in general. And I think it's fascinating. And I'm sure you've got a lot to say on it. Um, what would be the court's opinion and ruling about having a group of people in the public section of the court staring at a witness in somewhat intimidating way? When seen by Judge Olmedo, and she has made it very clear, she deals with gangs and gang intimidation in murder cases. She's well aware of witness harassment and the techniques that are used. She does look. Okay. She did when that priest came in, she questioned him. She does ask them straight out what's going on. If she sees it, she stops it and she will not have it. She has admonished everyone several times, okay? But then again, Judge Almeida is also listening to the witnesses, okay, and looking at the jury. So she doesn't see every little thing, but when brought to her attention, she immediately has been addressing it. And I do believe that if actually they can prove that any intimidation did happen, there will be sanctions. I think she's getting tired of it, actually. She seems a little less willing to put up with any of it at this point. Hey, Wrecker, very cool for you to stop in. I'm just about wrapping up now. It's been a long one. I didn't think I'd go this long, actually. Well, mm. Okay, let's get a couple more questions here. I love you guys look using the little minion guys. Aren't they cool? Yep. Who is the murder minion right to Jason? That would be, let's see. Oh, you mean the Chucky? Aunt Jared, the one with the red hair and the knife. That's that doll, Chucky. And then there's Freddy Krueger on the end, Chucky. That one there is Ed Gein, like, the guy from Saw with the face mask. Or it could be Jason. I'm not sure. Um, yeah, we've got quite a few little murder guys there. Clearview. It is very difficult to speak out against a person in power due to fear of not being believed, even worse if questioned in a drug state or soon after and questioning your own reality. Exactly. It is, they are definitely altered. They're already feeling the shame and abuse. They're not very clear about it. They're trying to give answers. They're being questioned why they use certain words and not other words, or why they said this that time and then like added to it or didn't mention one part of it the next time. You know, part of the testimony that was given, that is if 5 different people interview you, you're going to have at the end, if there are 5 different interviewers, there will be 5 different interviews. It will be based on the questions, how you question, the comfort, what direction they go in. Okay. And the amount of detail that can be given at the time. It does not mean that they're holding back. I mean, in this case, several of them were holding back because they felt intimidated. They felt unsafe, unsure. They knew Scientology was coming from them. The one report from Jane Doe 1 was clearly written under the guise of Julian Schwartz. He told her not to mention a gun. What words you can't talk about? It was handwritten in presence and also signed off of by him. And yet they have to actually answer for it, word for word. Word for word. Oh, the court needs to ban the public from this trial like they did the Manson trial. They have some people in there, but it's very limited. Tony, there's very few journalists. They are allowing representatives, like legal representatives and things like that. It's a small courtroom. It's not being televised. There is no audio. It's only the reporting of journalists. There's only a few allowed, and they're allowed to then take notes and give those notes out to the public, which is how I get the information. And many of those who are talking about it, we get it right from what they hear in there. Okay. I identified every murder minion except for the one I didn't recognize. I don't know which one it is. There's one that is just the killer, and he just has a knife, and he represents everybody that has a name that doesn't have a kitschy like face mask or a hat. There's Burglar Man, there's the chainsaw guy like from Saw. Okay. Let's see. Like I don't know. I think it's the first one that you talk about, and that would just be a regular murderer. Like he doesn't have a special designation. Okay. All right. On that, thank you very much for going over everything with me. Um, if you have any other questions later, you guys can hit the back of the video. And I know I should have put this on before for you guys before, but just because I didn't, I will remind you to please like and share and comment on the videos if you know anyone that's interested in any of the kinds of topics that we talk about, whether it be true crime or just the library chats that we do, any of the more social media aspects on the weekend. Go ahead, share the channel out. We're growing slowly, little by little, but it's also nice to increase our audience, to get more conversation going, more people for you guys to talk with in the chat too, and just share our opinions and stuff about this, not just me but with you all too. um, on that, I'd like to say good night. We are going tomorrow to do another just regular legal update, and it would be on the Carroll case versus Trump in regards to that assault, and also a couple of other small things that need reporting on. And last but not least, I will be putting out the actual sentencing and verdict for Letitia Stotch. I did record the judge's sentencing. He had a lot to say, and the victim statements. I will create a small little capture of that and put it in the playlist for you. But as you know, last week, it got to be so much with the details of the Letitia Stotch case and her arrogance, her defiance of the court, and the actual shenanigans that they made of it made it really difficult for me to even sit through any of it. She's but on that, I will at least give you an update. I feel I do owe you that, at least. Otherwise, I'll see you all tomorrow night.